The royal army of Thornhall gathered at dawn to hear a wolfless girl fail before the dead. They did not call it cruelty. They called it tradition. The war horn of the first alphas stood on a black stone altar at the edge of the training field, beneath banners torn by winter wind and old blood. It was larger than any mortal horn should have been, carved from the bone of the first royal wolf, wrapped in silver bands, and marked with the names of every alpha who had died defending the kingdom. No weak blood could lift it. No false wolf could sound it. No traitor could touch it without losing the hand. At least, that was what the soldiers believed. Mira Vale stood before it, in a plain, gray servant dress, barefoot on frost-hard earth, with hundreds of warriors watching her from the field. She was 19, small beside the armored wolves of Thornhall, her dark hair braided down her back with no ribbon, no crest, no family mark. Iron-silver cuffs circled her wrists, though everyone knew she did not need chains to be harmless. A girl without a wolf could not shift. A girl without a wolf could not command. A girl without a wolf could not belong to any war banner, blood oath, or sacred hunt. That was the wound Thornhall had carved into her name before she was old enough to understand it. Wolfless. Not sick. Not cursed. Not even dangerous enough to fear properly. Only unfinished. Mira had been raised in the lower barracks after being found as a child near the old battlefield, wrapped in a torn cloak that smelled of ash and rain. No wolf spirit answered inside her chest. No claw ever surfaced beneath her skin. No heat came during the shift moon, when other children first heard their wolves whisper. Mira heard only silence. The soldiers called her Softfoot because wolves did not turn when she passed. The servants called her Quiet because she never cried where men could hear. The council called her Useful because a girl with no wolf could be blamed without starting a blood feud. That morning she had been brought before the entire army to prove what everyone already believed. High Counselor Varric stood beside the altar, in a long black cloak stitched with silver law runes. He was not king, but many men lowered their heads faster for him than for the crown. His voice carried the smooth weight of age, power, and practiced sorrow. "Let the army witness," Varric said. Mira Vale has been accused of lying about hearing voices from the old battlefield. She has frightened young soldiers with claims that the dead are restless. She has spoken against council orders and dishonored the war dead with servant superstition. Mira kept her eyes down. She had not lied. 3 nights ago, while scrubbing mud from spear shafts near the West Armory, she had heard voices rising from the frost. Not whispers, not madness, names, dozens of them. Alphas who had died in battles, no one sang about anymore. They had spoken beneath the training field as if trapped under stone. "Do not let him sound the horn." That was all they had said. She told one stable guard, because he was kind. By sunrise, the council had taken her. Royal Alpha Cassian Draven stood at the head of the army, black armor over broad shoulders, dark cloak moving in the cold wind. He was 29, feared across the border packs, with a sharp face, dark hair, and eyes the pale gold of a wolf born to rule. Soldiers said his command could stop a charging beast. Nobles said his bloodline had never knelt. Enemies said his wolf was so powerful it could break another alpha's spirit with one stare. But Mira noticed what soldiers did not. Cassian's wolf was tired. She could not see it, because she had no wolf sight. She could not smell it, because she had no hunting senses. But she heard the wrongness in the silence around him. When royal alphas stood near old war relics, the dead names should have stirred. Around Cassian they went still, as if something in the ground was holding its breath. His gaze rested on her, without softness, not cruelly. Worse, like she was a problem he had not chosen, but was expected to solve. Varric turned toward him. "Your Majesty, the girl claims the dead speak against the council. Let the dead judge her tongue." A few soldiers laughed. Mira's fingers curled inside the cuffs. Cassian's voice cut across the field. "Remove her chains. Varric's expression did not change, but the pause was sharp. She stands accused of defiling a sacred relic. The horn will punish her if she lies, Cassian said. It does not require cuffs to make its judgment. For one breath, Mira looked up. Cassian was watching the horn, not her. Still, the order mattered. A guard unlocked the cuffs. They fell away, leaving red marks around her wrists. Varric gestured to the altar. Lift the horn. The field grew silent. Mira stepped forward. The closer she came, the colder the air became. The war horn lay across the black stone like a sleeping beast. Its silver bands were dull. Its carved names were worn. Yet beneath it, she heard something, not the voices from the battlefield this time, but a heartbeat. Slow, buried, waiting. Her hands shook as she reached for it. A soldier near the front muttered, "She will not move it." Another said, "Maybe it will take her fingers." Mira touched the horn. The world stopped. The frost beneath her feet cracked in a perfect circle. The banners snapped backward, though the wind had not changed. Every wolf in the army lifted its head. The horn was warm, not dead bone, living memory. Mira tried to pull her hands away, but the horn held her palms with a force gentler than a chain and stronger than law. A voice rose through it, so deep it seemed to come from the roots of the mountains. "Daughter of the Echo, why do you stand before us in shame?" Mira stopped breathing. Varric's face went pale. Cassian took one step forward. "What is happening?" Mira could not answer. The horn lifted from the altar by itself, not into Varric's hands, not toward Cassian, into hers. The soldiers recoiled. A wave of shock moved across the field, armor clattering as men stepped back from the wolfless girl, holding the sacred relic no weak blood was meant to lift. Mira's arms should have broken under the weight. Instead, the horn felt like it had been waiting for her bones. The voice spoke again. "Sound us." Varric shouted, "Stop her!" Cassian turned sharply toward him. That was when Mira understood. The council had not brought her here because they believed she would fail. They brought her here because they feared she might not. The horn pressed against her lips. Mira wanted to refuse. She wanted to throw it down, run back to the lower barracks, become nothing again, if nothing meant living past dawn. But beneath the field, the dead were no longer whispering. They were rising. She blew. The sound that came out was not music. It was judgment. The entire battlefield split with silver light. Frost exploded upward from the ground. The black banners tore free from their poles and hung in the air, as if held by invisible hands. Behind Mira, one by one, ghostly wolves and armored kings rose from beneath the earth, dead alphas, with moonlit crowns, broken swords, and eyes burning like old stars. Every soldier fell silent. Every wolf bowed its head. Cassian stared at the dead rulers of his bloodline, shock breaking through his cold control. The first dead alpha lifted a spectral blade and pointed it not at Mira, at the royal council. Then every dead voice spoke as one. Treason sits beside the living throne. The army froze. High Counselor Varric stepped backward, and the war horn in Mira's hands began to bleed silver. The silver blood running from the war horn did not fall to the ground. It rose. Thin streams lifted from the carved bone and floated through the frost-heavy air like shining threads. Each thread turned toward one of the dead alphas standing behind Mira, and as the silver touched their ghostly armor, the ancient names carved into the horn began to glow. Oral the First Fang, Darien of the Red Pass, Maelor Stormcrowned, Veira the Iron Luna. Names Mira had scrubbed from old shields without ever being allowed to ask why some were honored, and some were scratched nearly invisible. Now they stood in full form beneath the winter sky, dead kings and queens of Thornhall, their spectral wolves beside them, their eyes fixed on the royal council. Not one of them looked at Mira with contempt. That frightened her more than hatred would have. High Counselor Varric recovered quickly, but not fully. Mira heard it in his breath. A break. A fracture beneath his polished authority. An illusion, he declared. The girl has awakened battlefield rot. This is not ancestral judgment. The first dead alpha turned his head. The entire army stepped back. Even Royal Alpha Cassian went still. The dead ruler's voice rolled across the field like thunder under stone. Varric, son of Nocthar, keeper of sealed laws, oathbreaker of the Ninth Banner, we remember your hand. The color drained from Varric's face. Mira gripped the horn harder. Its warmth had become almost painful, but she did not release it. She could not. Not yet. The horn was not forcing her. It was asking her to endure. Cassian looked from the dead alphas to Varric. What oathbreaker? Varric bowed his head, but the motion was too quick, too controlled. Your Majesty. Dead echoes speak in fragments. They accuse without context. One of the ghostly wolves snarled. Mira felt the sound in her ribs. The dead Luna, Vera, stepped forward. She wore armor split down the side, and a crown of broken silver rested above her braided hair. Her eyes found Cassian. Living Alpha, your wolf weakens because the ancestral chain was cut from your throne. A murmur tore through the soldiers. Cassian's face hardened, but the words had struck something hidden. Mira saw his hand curl once near his chest, where the wolf spirit was said to live. The entire army knew the rumors. Cassian had won every border war, but his shift came slower each winter. His command still shook men, yet the sacred wolves no longer sang when he entered the old halls. He had no Luna, no heir, and no full moon hunt had ended in triumph since his coronation. Varric had always called it the burden of rule. The dead called it severance. Cassian's voice dropped. Explain. Varric turned toward him. Your Majesty, we should move this trial inside. Before fear spreads, the horn burned in Mira's hands. The dead were not finished. She did not know how she knew. She only felt the words pressing against the back of her throat. Not her own, but waiting for her breath. Mira whispered. No, it was not loud, but everyone heard it. Varric's eyes snapped toward her. You will be silent. The war horn answered for her. A deep note rang from it without her blowing. Every soldier on the field dropped to one knee, not by choice, not by force from Cassian, by something older than living Alpha command. Mira remained standing. The wolfless girl remained standing. The humiliation that had brought her here began to turn into something the court had not prepared for. Cassian slowly looked at the kneeling army, then back at her. His gaze had changed. Suspicion remained. So did danger. But beneath both, Mira heard something else. Attention. For the first time, the Royal Alpha was truly looking at her. What did you hear 3 nights ago? He asked. Varric moved at once. Your Majesty. Cassian did not raise his voice. Speak over me again, counselor, and I will decide whether the dead are the only ones who should be answering today. Silence followed. Mira swallowed. Her mouth tasted like frost and silver. They said, not to let him sound the horn. Cassian's eyes narrowed. Him? Mira turned her face toward Varric. The field held its breath. Varric's expression remained composed, but the scent of fear rose sharp from the men around him. I thought they meant you, Mira said to Cassian. I thought the dead feared the king, but they meant the counselor. The spectral alphas lifted their blades as one. Varric's mask finally cracked, only slightly. Enough. Then the ground beneath the council platform split open. Not wide. Just a thin black wound across the frost, running from the altar toward the old war council seats. From that crack came the smell of buried iron, burned fur, and old royal blood. Mira nearly dropped the horn as another vision tore through her. She saw the same field, years ago, at night, filled with torches. A younger Cassian knelt before the war horn during his coronation. Behind him stood Varric and 6 council elders, each holding a silver hook attached to a chain buried beneath the altar. When Cassian lifted the horn to swear himself to the dead, Varric cut the chain before the note was complete. The dead alphas had tried to answer. The council had sealed them below. Cassian had risen as king without hearing his ancestors, and his wolf had been weakening ever since. Mira gasped as the vision ended. Cassian had seen it too. So had the army. Varric moved before anyone else could speak. He drew a black ceremonial blade from inside his sleeve and slashed his palm over the crack in the earth. The frost turned red. The dead alphas flickered. Mira felt the horn grow suddenly heavy. Cassian lunged toward Varric, but 6 council guards stepped between them, their armor marked with hidden black runes Mira had never seen before. The runes flared, and for one instant, Cassian staggered, as if something had struck his wolf from inside. Varric's voice rang across the field. "The girl is not a witness. She is the last echo vessel." Her bloodline was erased, because it could give the dead command over the living throne. Mira's heart stopped. Last echo vessel, bloodline, erased. The words made no sense, and too much sense at once. Varric pointed the blade at her. "Seize her. If she sounds the horn again, the dead will not only accuse, they will remember everything." The guards advanced. Cassian straightened, pain still flickering across his face. His eyes met Mira's over the soldiers and spectral dead. For one heartbeat, he looked like a king caught between the court that raised him and the girl it had tried to destroy. Then his wolf growled. Not loudly, but enough for the earth to tremble. "No one touches her," Cassian said. The army lifted its head. Varric's guards stopped. Mira stood in the center of the field, with the bleeding war horn in her hands, the dead alphas fading behind her, and the royal alpha's protection arriving one breath too late to feel safe. Then, from beneath the battlefield, a child's voice whispered through the horn. "Mira Vale, daughter of the silenced banner, ask the king why your mother died under his throne." The child's voice should not have known Mira's name. It should not have known her mother existed. For 19 years, Mira had carried the emptiness where a family should have been like a second shadow. She had been told she was found near the old battlefield after a storm, wrapped in a torn cloak and left among broken shields. No one knew who had abandoned her. No one knew what pack had failed to claim her. No one knew whether her mother had died, fled, or simply looked at a wolfless infant and decided the world would be kinder without remembering her. But the war horn knew. "Mira Vale, daughter of the silenced banner, ask the king why your mother died under his throne." The words moved through the field like a knife drawn slowly from a hidden wound. Cassian's face changed first, not with guilt, with confusion sharp enough to become anger. "My throne?" he said. The horn trembled in Mira's hands. The silver blood still rose from its carved bone in thin threads, but the dead alphas behind her were flickering, their forms weakening, as Varric's blood sank into the black crack across the battlefield. High Counselor Varric's guards stood frozen between him and the royal alpha. They did not know which command to obey now. The living king had ordered them away from Mira. The council that paid and promoted them had ordered her seized. Above them, the dead rulers of Thornhall watched like judgment, struggling to remain in the world. Varric wiped his bleeding palm against his cloak. "Your Majesty, do not entertain battlefield ghosts. The girl's power is unstable. The horn is feeding on old grief." Cassian turned on him. "Then why does old grief know what you tried to hide?" A murmur rolled through the army. Mira held the horn close to her chest. Its warmth had begun to seep into her bones. Not comfortably. It felt like a fire, remembering she had always been cold. She looked at Cassian, though looking at him was dangerous. His attention felt like standing too near a blade. "You do not know what it means?" "No," he said. The answer came too quickly to be political. The war horn hummed. The child's voice came again, softer this time, almost buried beneath the fading dead. "Ask where the 9th banner sleeps." Varric moved. Not toward Mira, Toward the altar, he slammed his bloodied palm onto a black rune carved beneath the war horn's resting place. The rune had been hidden by frost until his blood awakened it. It flared red, and the ghostly alphas recoiled as if struck. Mira cried out as pain shot through her wrists. Cassian stepped forward, but Varric lifted the ceremonial blade to his own throat. "Another step," Varric said, "and I seal the horn with my death. The dead will vanish before they finish poisoning your army against you." Cassian stopped. Every soldier stopped with him. There were few things more dangerous than a powerful man willing to turn his death into a lock. Varric looked at the army now, voice rising. "Listen well. The girl is not innocent. She is an echo vessel, last remnant of a bloodline that once let the dead alphas override the living crown. Her kind was forbidden after the Banner Wars, because they made kings, slaves to corpses and old vengeance. If she sounds the horn again, the dead may command every wolf on this field. Even you, Majesty." Fear shifted across the soldiers. Mira felt it turn toward her. It always did. One moment, she was too weak to matter. The next, too dangerous to live. Cassian looked at her, and for a breath, Mira expected him to step away. He had no reason to trust her. No reason to gamble an army on a girl who had never shifted, never fought, never stood before power except as a body to be judged. Instead, he asked, "Can they command me?" Mira swallowed. "I do not know." "Can you?" "No." The answer came from a place deeper than fear. Varric laughed. "She does not know what she is." "No," Cassian said, his eyes still on Mira. "But she does not lie as smoothly as you." That was when the dead Luna Vera lifted her broken sword. A final thread of silver blood connected the warhorn to her chest. Her voice was faint now, but it carried. "Living Alpha, if you want truth, take the girl beneath the throne before the council buries the 9th banner again." Varric snarled. Silence. The red rune flared. The dead alphas vanished. All at once they were gone. The field became only soldiers, frost, torn banners, and a wolfless girl holding a sacred relic that should have broken her hands. Then the horn went cold. Its weight returned in full. Mira nearly fell. Cassian reached her before anyone else. He did not touch the horn. He caught her elbow instead, steadying her with one firm hand. His palm was warm through the thin sleeve of her dress. Mira stiffened. Not because it hurt, but because no alpha had ever touched her without disgust or correction. He released her the moment she found her balance. "Can you walk?" he asked. Yes. It was not fully true, but pride carried what her knees could not. Cassian turned toward the army. "The trial is ended." Varric's face hardened. "Your Majesty, the girl must be confined under council authority." "No." A single word. The soldiers felt it like a command striking shields. Cassian continued. "She will come with me to the old throne vault." Varric stepped down from the council platform. "That vault has been sealed since your coronation. Then it opens now. It cannot be opened without council consent." Cassian's pale gold eyes sharpened. "Watch me." For one heartbeat, the whole army seemed to lean toward violence. Council guards shifted. Royal wolves lowered their hands toward sword hilts. Frost cracked beneath boots. Mira stood between them all with the war horn in her arms, suddenly aware that she had become the spark in a kingdom already soaked with oil. Then Varric bowed, too gracefully. "As my king commands." Mira did not trust the surrender. Cassian did not either. She heard it in the faint growl beneath his breath. The royal alpha gestured to 2 of his personal guards. "Escort the counselor to the inner hall. He does not leave my sight." Varric's eyes flashed. "Am I accused?" Cassian looked toward the black crack in the field, where the red rune still smoked. Not yet. The army parted as Cassian led Mira from the training ground. No one laughed now. That should have felt like victory. It did not. Silence could be sharper than mockery when fear held it. Mira carried the war horn against her chest. The silver bands no longer glowed, but every few steps she heard the faintest sound from within it. Not the dead alphas this time. Not the child. A woman humming, Elolabu. The melody made her throat ache with a grief she did not remember earning. Inside Thornhall, the corridors narrowed into older stone. Cassian walked beside her instead of ahead, which made the guards uneasy. A king did not usually match pace with a wolfless servant girl. A king did not usually watch her hands for signs of pain. After a long silence, he said, "Did the horn hurt you?" Mira kept her eyes forward. "Less than the army did." He said nothing. The answer had landed. They reached the old throne vault below the western tower, where roots from the ancient wolfwood grew through the stone. The door was black iron, sealed with 7 alpha marks and 6 council marks. The 7th council mark had been scraped away. Mira stopped. The war horn warmed again. Cassian noticed. "What is it?" She touched the damaged seal. Beneath the scraped metal, a shape remained. A banner stitched with a crescent fang. "The 9th banner," she whispered. Behind them, Varric's voice echoed softly from the corridor. "Your Majesty," he said. "Step away from that door." Mira turned. The counselor stood between the guards who were supposed to hold him, but both men were pale, motionless, their eyes clouded black. Varric smiled without warmth. "I warned you," he said. "Some truths are sealed because kingdoms cannot survive remembering them." Then the old throne vault opened from the inside, and the darkness beyond whispered Mira's mother's name. The darkness inside the throne vault did not smell empty. It smelled of rain-soaked wool, old blood, burned cedar, and something softer beneath it all, milk, smoke, and a woman's skin remembered by a child too young to remember her face. Mira stopped breathing. The war horn warmed against her chest until the silver bands pressed heat through the fabric of her gray dress. From the open vault came the same humming she had heard in the corridor, the lullaby rising now in broken notes, familiar enough to hurt and strange enough to frighten her. Cassian stepped slightly ahead of her, then caught himself. He looked back. For the first time since the training field, he did not move as a king expecting obedience. He moved like a man realizing every instinct he had been taught might lead him wrong. "Mira," he said quietly, "do not enter unless you choose to." Varric laughed softly from the corridor. The 2 royal guards beside him still stood with black clouded eyes, breathing but empty, their hands resting on sword hilts. Whatever spell held them had not come from the vault. It came from the counselor. "Chivalry will not save her," Varric said. "The vault opened because it wants its vessel back." Mira turned toward him. "What was my mother's name?" The question struck the corridor harder than accusation. Varric's smile thinned. "Dead women collect names. Living kingdoms collect laws." Cassian's growl moved through the stone. "Answer her." Varric looked at the Royal Alpha, and for a moment, his mask slipped enough to reveal contempt, sharpened by years of careful service. "You command like your father." Before the horn stopped answering him, Cassian went still. Mira felt the silence deepen. "My father?" Cassian said. Varric tilted his head. "You thought the severance began with you?" The war horn pulsed. The darkness inside the vault answered with a woman's whisper. "No, little wolf. It began when they taught kings to fear the dead." Mira turned toward the vault. "Mother?" she breathed. No shape appeared. Only darkness, roots, and faint silver light moving far within. But the voice, whether ghost, memory, or echo, wrapped around her like a hand she had never known and missed anyway. Varric moved fast. The black clouded guards drew their swords and lunged toward Mira. Cassian struck first. He did not shift. He did not need to. His body blurred with alpha speed, one hand catching the first guard's wrist and twisting until the sword fell, his shoulder slamming into the second hard enough to drive him into the wall. Yet, he did not kill them. Even in fury, He saw what Mira saw. Their eyes were not their own. The war horn gave a low sound. The black fog in the guard's eyes trembled. Mira lifted the horn without thinking and whispered, "Wake." The word was not hers. It came through her. Silver light flashed from the horn. The blackness fled the guard's eyes like smoke ripped from a flame. Both men collapsed, gasping, alive and terrified. Varric stared at Mira. Fear showed this time. Then he cut his palm again and pressed blood against the corridor wall. Black runes flared across the stone, sealing the hallway behind him with a barrier of dark red light. Cassian turned toward the barrier, but Mira caught his sleeve. "Wait." He looked at her hand on his arm. So did she. She released him quickly, heat rising to her face despite the cold. He did not comment. He only said, "Why?" "Because he wants you to chase him away from the vault." Cassian's eyes sharpened. The woman's voice inside the vault whispered, "The daughter hears what the king was trained to ignore." Mira's throat tightened. Cassian heard it too. She knew by the way his jaw locked. Together, they turned toward the open door. The throne vault was not a room. It was a buried hall beneath Thornhall's oldest foundation. Wolfwood roots twisted through the ceiling like black veins. Broken banners hung along the walls, their colors faded to shadow. At the far end stood an ancient stone throne, older than the royal one above, surrounded by 9 banner poles. 8 still held remnants of cloth. The 9th was bare. Mira stepped inside, and the war horn began to bleed silver again. Not violently this time, like it was grieving. The floor beneath her bare feet lit with names, not all at once. One by one. Soldiers, mothers, banner keepers, children, alphas, lunas. People erased from the records of Thornhall's wars. At the center of them, a name burned brighter than the rest. Mira Vale. Mira fell to her knees. She did not choose to. Her body simply forgot how to stand. Vale, last horn-bearer of the 9th banner. Her mother had a name, not an absence, not a storm story, not a torn cloak left in mud. A name. Cassian stood beside her. Silent. The kind of silence that did not steal space from grief. The war horn lifted from Mira's hands and floated before the bare 9th banner pole. Silver blood rose from it and wove itself into cloth. Dark gray, edged with moon-white thread, marked by a crescent fang. The 9th banner returned. The vault shook. Every dead voice inside the stone spoke at once, then narrowed into the voice of Vale. "My daughter, they called you Wolfless because your wolf was never meant to live inside your chest." Mira's hands curled against the floor. "What does that mean?" The horn turned toward her. "Echo vessels do not carry one wolf. They carry the hearing of the dead. Your spirit was hidden from the living packs, so the council could not use you to command the ancestors." Cassian drew a slow breath. "The council erased her bloodline." The voice answered, "Yes, and yours helped bury us." The words cut into the vault. Cassian did not deny them. Mira turned her face toward him, expecting royal anger, defense, the instinct of kings to shield themselves from inherited guilt. Instead, Cassian looked at the restored banner. "My father knew?" A new memory opened across the vault wall. A younger king, Orlin Cassian's father, stood before this same throne, Varric at his side, while Vale knelt in chains with infant Mira wrapped against her chest. Saren held the war horn in bloodied hands. Behind her, ghostly alphas filled the hall. Saren's voice was clear. "The council has cut the ancestral chain. Your son will inherit a throne severed from the dead." King Orlin's face twisted with fear. "You would turn my own fathers against me. I would let them speak." Varric stepped forward. "No living throne survives. If the dead may accuse it forever." Then he took Saren. Mira cried out, but the memory did not stop. Saren fell, still clutching infant Mira. With her last strength, She pressed the baby's palm to the warhorn and whispered, "Hide her hearing, where no living wolf can scent it." The infant did not cry. The warhorn drank the sound, and Mira's wolf vanished before it ever woke. The memory faded. Mira could not move. Cassian's voice came rough. "Your mother died under my father's throne." "Yes," Saren whispered, "but not by his hand alone." The vault doors slammed shut behind them. Black runes crawled across the walls. Varric's voice echoed from beyond the barrier, cold and triumphant. "No, by all our hands." The warhorn dropped back into Mira's grasp. At the far end of the vault, the ancient stone throne cracked open, and from beneath it rose the shadow of a wolf with no head, wearing a crown made of broken banner poles. The headless wolf rose from beneath the ancient throne without a sound. That was what made it terrible. No growl, no howl, no breath. Only shadow gathering into the shape of something that had once been royal, once been alive, once perhaps been sacred before men cut away enough truth to leave only hunger. Its body was enormous, larger than Cassian's werewolf, would have been in full shift, with ribs made of darkness and old iron. Around its neck hung chains of broken silver. Where its head should have been, there was only a crown made from shattered banner poles, each splinter marked with the sigils of dead houses. Mira felt the warhorn tremble in her hands, not with fear, recognition. Cassian stepped in front of her by instinct. This time, Mira did not resent it. The thing before them was not a court insult, not a council trick, not a soldier's mockery. It was a wound given form. Still, she touched his arm. "Not in front," she whispered. Cassian's jaw tightened. Then he moved half a step aside. Beside her, the headless wolf turned toward them, though it had no eyes. Black mist poured from the crown's broken edges. Every banner along the vault walls began to rot at once, cloth darkening, threads unraveling into ash. Saren Vale's voice rose from the war horn, strained now. "That is the severed crown. The council made it from every oath they cut from the dead." Cassian's face hardened. "Why would they create that?" From beyond the sealed vault doors, Varric answered instead. His voice came through the black runes like smoke through cracks. "We did not create it. We contained it. Every kingdom has a cost, Your Majesty. Thornhall's cost was that the dead wanted too much influence over the living." Mira gripped the horn. "They wanted to speak. They wanted to accuse," Varric said. "There is little difference when one is trying to rule." Cassian's eyes burned pale gold. "You severed the ancestral chain and called silence peace. I preserved your throne. My throne is weakening because the girl touched what should have stayed buried." The severed crown lunged. Cassian caught Mira and threw them both aside as the shadow wolf struck the floor where they had stood. The stone shattered. Black frost spread from the impact, crawling over the illuminated names until several began to fade. Mira cried out. The fading names hurt more than the fall. She scrambled toward them, but Cassian caught her wrist. "Do not touch that frost. My mother's name is there." His grip loosened at once. The war horn pulsed against her ribs. "Sound us," the dead whispered. Mira lifted it toward her lips. Cassian's hand shot out, stopping just short of the horn. He did not touch it. "If you sound it here, what happens?" "I do not know. That thing may be waiting for it." Mira looked toward the headless wolf. The crown of broken banners turned slowly in her direction, black mist spilling like breath. It was waiting. Hungry. Not for blood. For memory. Varric laughed softly beyond the door. "The Royal Alpha understands quicker than you, girl. Blow the horn in the vault, and the dead will answer through the severed crown. Every accusation, every old grievance, every buried war will pour into it. It will tear Thornhall apart from root to tower." Cassian called toward the door. "Then why trap us in here with it?" "Because you insisted on truth before stability. Now survive it." The black runes flared. The severed crown struck again. Cassian shifted halfway to meet it. Not fully. Mira saw the strain tear through him as claws burst from his hands and shadow fur surged along his arms before failing to complete. His wolf was strong, but something in him broke before the full form came. He slammed into the headless beast, driving it back only a few steps before its broken banner crown struck his shoulder and sent him crashing into a pillar. Cassian! His name left Mira before caution could stop it. He rose with blood at his mouth, eyes bright with pain and fury. Stay behind the altar. No. His gaze snapped to her. Mira stood with the war horn held tight, her knees shaking, her mother's name glowing beneath her feet. I have spent my whole life behind stronger people, she said. It never made me safe. For one breath, his expression changed. Not soft. Not yet. But he heard her. The severed crown turned toward Mira again. Saren's voice trembled from the horn. Daughter, you cannot fight it as a wolf would. I have no wolf. No. You have us. The words moved through every name on the floor. Mira understood then not fully, but enough. The council had called her Wolfless because they measured power only by claw, shift, dominance, and scent. But her inheritance was not absence. It was echo. She did not carry one wolf spirit in her chest because her bloodline had been created to hear many. To give the dead witness without letting them rule unchecked. The war horn was not a weapon. It was a court. The severed crown charged. Mira lifted the horn. Cassian shouted, Mira! She did not blow it. She spoke into it. Saren Vale, last hornbearer of the 9th banner, she said, voice shaking. Stand witness. The horn answered with a single silver note. Not loud. Precise. The severed crown stopped mid-lunge. A woman's figure rose from the floor between Mira and the beast. Saren Vale appeared as moonlit ash and silver blood, tall and battle-worn, with dark hair falling around a face Mira knew only because her own had been shaped from it. Mira could not breathe. Saren turned once. Her eyes met her daughter's. There was no time for embrace. No time for all the lost years. Only one look carrying a lifetime of apology. Then Saren faced the severed crown. I accuse High Counselor Varric and the Thornhall War Council of severing the 9th banner, murdering hornbearers, binding dead alpha testimony, and weakening the living throne by cutting it from ancestral witness. The severed crown screamed without a mouth. One of the broken banner poles in its crown cracked. Cassian stared. You did not summon all the dead. Mira lowered the horn slightly, understanding dawning. Only one witness at a time. Saren's spirit nodded. Truth must be carried, not unleashed. The severed crown staggered, then struck Saren with a shadow claw. Her form flickered. Mira's heart lurched. Mother! Cassian moved before the second strike landed, ramming his shoulder into the beast and driving it away from Saren's fading form. He was bleeding now, one arm hanging lower than the other, but his eyes remained on Mira. Call the next witness, he said. Mira looked at him, a royal alpha, wounded by the truth of his own throne, choosing to protect the witness instead of silence her. Something dangerous shifted in her chest. Not love, not trust. A beginning that frightened her more. She lifted the war horn again. Oral the first fang, she called. Stand witness. The vault shook as the first dead alpha rose behind her, crowned in moonlit iron, sword broken through his chest. Varric's voice beyond the door lost its smoothness. Stop. Mira did not. Darien of the Red Pass, she called. Stand witness. Another spirit rose. Vera the Iron Luna. Stand witness. The dead Luna appeared beside Saren, broken sword lifted. One by one, Mira called them not as an army, not as vengeance, but as witnesses. Each accusation cracked another piece of the severed crown. The headless wolf thrashed, shrinking and swelling, as the lies holding it together began to separate into names. Cassian fought beside the spirits, not commanding them, only keeping the beast from reaching Mira while she read the dead into order. At last, only one broken banner pole remained in the crown, the bare 9th, Saren turned toward Mira. "This one is yours." Mira's hands tightened around the horn. "I do not know what to say." "Yes, you do," Cassian said, breathing hard, blood on his armor. "Say what they took." Mira closed her eyes. All her life, one word had followed her: Wolfless. She lifted her face toward the headless wolf and spoke into the horn. "I accuse the council of stealing my mother's voice, burying my banner, hiding my bloodline, and calling me empty because they feared what I could hear." The 9th banner pole shattered. The severed crown collapsed in a storm of black ash and silver light. The vault doors burst open. Varric stood beyond them, no longer smiling. Behind him, soldiers, council guards, and half the royal court stared into the ancient vault at Mira Vale holding the war horn, surrounded by the dead alphas of Thornhall. And this time, every spirit turned toward the living court. "The trial," they said, "is not over." The trial is not over. The words did not come from one dead alpha. They came from all of them. The ancient throne vault became a chamber of judgment. Silver light burned across the roots in the ceiling. The restored 9th banner hung behind Mira like a moonlit wound finally given cloth. Around her stood the dead rulers of Thornhall alphas, Lunas, banner keepers, and war spirits whose names had been carved into horn, stone, and memory before the council taught the kingdom which dead were convenient enough to honor. Varric stood beyond the broken vault doors, with half the court behind him. For once, he had no speech ready. Cassian moved to Mira's side, one hand pressed against the wound on his ribs, his breathing uneven. Blood darkened the edge of his black armor, but he remained upright because kings were trained to bleed privately, even when the whole world had seen the knife. Mira saw the strain in him. She also saw how every dead alpha turned toward him, not bowing, not accusing yet, but waiting. That was worse. Varric finally lifted his chin. "This is exactly why echo vessels were forbidden. The dead do not stop at witness, they become appetite." Mira held the war horn tighter. "You keep calling witness appetite because you are afraid of being named." The old counselor's gaze cut to her. "Child, you know nothing of rule." "No," she said. "I know what it means to have rule step over your mother's body and call the floor clean." The court went silent. Cassian looked at her. Something in his face shifted, but he did not speak for her. That mattered more than any defense he could have offered. Veyra the Iron Luna stepped forward, ghostly armor gleaming. Her broken sword pointed toward the court. "Let the living throne answer." Arl the First Fang turned his burning eyes to Cassian. "Royal Alpha Cassian Draven, son of Orlin, blood of Thornhall, do you claim innocence because the crime began before your crown?" Every soldier in the corridor held their breath. Cassian stood very still. Varric seized the opening. "Your Majesty, you are not required to answer spectral accusations. No living law." Cassian cut him off. "No." The word fell hard. He stepped forward despite the pain. "I do not claim innocence for what I inherited," he said. "I claim responsibility for what I learn and still choose to ignore." Mira's breath caught. The dead alphas did not praise him. They did not soften. Their judgment was older than flattery. Auril asked, "Will you open the war records?" Varric's face sharpened. "Your Majesty." Cassian did not look at him. "Yes. Will you restore the 9th banner?" Cassian's gaze moved to Mira. Not possessive, not ceremonial. He did not make her into a symbol without asking. "If its bearer chooses it restored," he said. The dead turned toward Mira. Her heart pounded. For 19 years, the word banner had belonged to soldiers, alphas, bloodlines, and men who died with songs after battle. She had belonged to laundry smoke, barrack floors, and the quiet places where unwanted children learned not to ask questions. Now a dead queen, a murdered mother, and an entire ancestral court waited for her answer. Mira swallowed. I do not know how to be a banner bearer. Saren Vale's spirit stood nearest to her, face silver with grief and pride. No child should be born knowing how to carry the dead. Then what am I supposed to do? Carry one truth at a time. Mira looked down at the war horn. One truth at a time. That had saved them from the severed crown. Not unleashing every dead grievance into the world, not letting vengeance become law, but naming each wound until the thing built from silence had no place left to hide. Mira lifted her head. Then yes, restore it. But not as a war banner, the court murmured. Varric gave a bitter laugh. A banner that does not go to war? Mira looked at him. A banner that remembers why war began. The 9th banner flared behind her. Silver thread moved through the dark cloth, forming not only the crescent fang, but hundreds of tiny names around its border. Some Mira knew now. Most she did not. Her mother's name shone at the center. Saren Vale. Cassian lowered his head once. Then the 9th banner will be restored as witness banner of Thornhall. A second sound moved through the vault. Not thunder. Not a howl. Approval. Deep beneath stone. Varric's expression hardened. You would weaken the army on the eve of border war. Cassian turned slowly. What border war? The question changed the air. Varric's silence answered too much. Mira felt the war horn warm again, warning her before the next truth arrived. Vera, the Iron Luna, lifted her broken sword. Ask him why Frostmir's envoys never reached the southern gate. Cassian's eyes narrowed. Frostmir sent envoys? A murmur passed through the court. Several nobles looked at one another too quickly. Varric raised his hands. Frostmir sent spies dressed as envoys. The council acted to protect Thornhall. The war horn pulsed. Lee. The word did not sound aloud, but every dead spirit turned at once. Cassian's jaw tightened. Where are they? No answer. Mira stepped toward Varric. Where are they? The old counselor looked at her, as if he still could not accept that a girl he had humiliated before the army now forced questions into the open. Dead, he said at last. Cassian's wolf stirred behind his eyes. By whose order? Varric smiled faintly. Yours, eventually. The vault went cold. Cassian moved so fast 2 guards flinched back, but he stopped himself before touching the counselor. His voice dropped into something more dangerous than shouting. Explain. Varric looked past him toward the court. Frostmir weakens. Its northern mines fail. Its young alpha has no heir. Its border packs are divided. Thornhall could take 3 valleys before winter ends. Your father planned it. The council prepared it. We needed only a provocation strong enough to unite the army. Mira whispered. The dead said not to let him sound the horn. Cassian turned toward her. She understood at the same moment he did. The war horn of the first alphas did not only summon witnesses. In war, it could summon obedience. If Varric sounded it after the dead had been sealed, after the ancestral chain had been cut, the horn would not carry true alpha judgment. It would carry the council's severed command through every soldier sworn to Thornhall. A war begun with stolen dead authority. Cassian looked at Varric. You were going to use my army. I was going to give you a victory great enough to hide your weakening wolf. The words struck Cassian like a public wound. Varric leaned closer. Do you think the army does not know? That your shift falters? That the old war wolves no longer answer you? That every winter you become more crown and less beast? I protected the throne from the truth you could not survive. Cassian's face went still. Mira remembered the dead Luna's words. His wolf weakens because the ancestral chain was cut from the throne. She took 1 step toward him. He made the wound, then called himself the healer. Cassian's eyes met hers. For 1 heartbeat, the vault faded around them. The court, the dead, the council, the restored banner. There was only a royal alpha raised to command, and a wolfless girl raised to vanish, both discovering that their lives had been shaped by the same hand. Then shouting erupted from above. A soldier stumbled down the corridor, armor dented, face streaked with blood. "Your Majesty," Cassian turned. "Speak. The southern gate has been opened." Varric smiled. The soldier swallowed. "Council riders sent word to the army that Frostmere assassins breached the palace. The war horns are being carried to the outer fields." Cassian's eyes flashed. "Who ordered it?" The soldier looked at Varric. The answer did not need sound. Then a deep horn blast rolled through Thornhall from far above. Not the sacred war horn in Mira's hands. Another horn. Then another. War horns, ordinary but numerous, calling the army to muster. Varric's smile widened. "You open the vault, Majesty. You let the past distract you. The living war has already begun." Cassian seized him by the front of his cloak and slammed him against the wall. "Call it off." "I cannot." Varric's eyes glittered. "That is the beauty of systems, boy. Once built well enough, they no longer require one man's hand." The war horn in Mira's hands grew hot enough to burn. The dead alphas turned toward the ceiling. Saren's voice came urgently. "Daughter, if the false war begins before the 9th banner is restored, the army will march under severed command." Mira's throat tightened. "How do we stop it?" Oral the First Fang answered. "Sound the true horn before the false horns reach the outer field." Varric laughed. "She will never reach it in time." The upper halls shook with soldiers running, bells ringing, gates opening. Cassian released Varric and turned to Mira. His face was pale beneath the blood and frost, but his voice was clear. "I can clear a path." Mira looked down at the horn. "And if I sound it wrong?" "Then we face what answers." The dead watched them. The court watched them. Varric watched with the smug calm of a man certain that fear would do what chains had not. Mira thought of her mother bleeding in this vault, thought of the dead buried beneath the training field, thought of being called Wolfless by men who feared what she could hear. Then she lifted the war horn to her chest. "No," she said. "We do not face what answers." Cassian frowned. "Mira?" She looked at him, voice steadier than her hands. "We ask it to witness." The 9th banner snapped open behind her. Cassian drew his sword. Together, they ran toward the war above. They ran through Thornhall's lower corridors with the dead at their backs and war waking above them. Mira carried the sacred war horn against her chest, while the restored 9th banner followed like a living shadow, its dark cloth snapping, though no wind reached the stone halls. Cassian ran beside her with his sword drawn, blood marking his armor where the severed crown had struck him, his breath controlled but strained. Behind them came the ghostly light of dead alphas moving through walls, roots, and old stone not as an army unleashed, but as witnesses summoned to keep pace with the truth. Above, ordinary war horns called from the outer fields. One blast, then another, then a third. Each note pulled Thornhall closer to a war built on lies. Soldiers thundered through the palace. Messengers shouted of Frostmere assassins, breached gates, murdered envoys, lies already wearing the armor of emergency. Varric's system moved exactly as he had promised. It did not need him anymore. Council captains repeated orders. Gate wardens opened armories. Riders saddled wolves. By the time the truth reached the battlefield, the army might already be marching. Mira's hands tightened around the horn. It was heavier now, not because the relic had changed, but because she understood what it held. Not magic meant to command men, not glory, not victory. Memory. Witness. Dead voices that could either become justice or become vengeance, depending on the living hand that carried them. At the first stairwell, council soldiers blocked the way. Their armor bore no open council mark, but black runes pulsed beneath the breastplates. Men Varric had prepared long before that dawn. Men trained to obey the system, even if the king stood against it. Their captain raised his blade. By emergency war authority, no one passes. Cassian did not slow. I am your war authority. The captain's eyes flickered. Until the council determines whether your command has been compromised. Cassian's wolf surfaced in his gaze, pale gold burning nearly white. The hall darkened around him. Mira felt the soldier's fear. She also felt Cassian's restraint. It would have been easy for him to cut them down. He had the right, the strength, the rage. But every body on the floor would become another truth Varric could twist. The Royal Alpha slaughtering his own soldiers under a wolfless girl's influence. Mira lifted the war horn slightly. Captain, she said, who told you Frostmere assassins breached the gate? He glanced at her with disgust. The council seal carried the report. Did you see the bodies? His jaw tightened. Did you see the assassins? No answer. Did you hear the dead accuse Frostmere? Mira asked. The captain's grip shifted. Cassian looked at her once. She stepped forward, though her knees wanted fear more than courage. You are about to raise a sword against your king and march to war because someone handed you a sealed order. If that is enough to kill for, then sound your own name before the horn and let the dead witness it. She held out the war horn. The captain stared at it. Behind Mira, Oral the First Fang appeared in a shimmer of moonlit armor. The dead Alpha said nothing. He only watched. That was enough. The captain lowered his sword. One by one, his men stepped aside. Cassian passed them without triumph. Mira followed, but as she did, the captain whispered, "If the council lied." Mira paused. "Then remember, who taught you to obey? Before you learned to ask." They climbed. At the upper gate, chaos swallowed the palace. The outer courtyard stretched below the eastern towers, packed with soldiers forming ranks beneath storm-gray morning light. Werewolves were being armored. Banner poles rose, drums beat. Captains shouted orders over the repeated blasts of false war horns from the field beyond the walls. At the center of the courtyard, 3 council riders stood on black horses, reading Varric's forged proclamation. By authority of the Royal War Council, Frostmere has violated Guest, right and sent assassins under envoy colors. Thornhall marches by blood law. The Royal Alpha's command is under protective review until the threat is purged. A roar went up from the soldiers. Cassian stepped onto the balcony above them. His voice struck the courtyard like a blade. "Who dares place my command under review?" The courtyard froze. Every head turned upward. The council riders paled, but the lead rider lifted the sealed proclamation. "Your Majesty, under war emergency statute." Cassian raised his sword. "That statute died beneath my throne." The statement rippled through the army, confusing those who had not seen the vault, frightening those who had. Mira stepped beside him. The reaction was immediate. Murmurs, disgust, fear, recognition from those who had watched her lift the war horn at dawn. The Wolfless girl, the echo vessel, the reason the dead had risen. The lead rider seized the crowd's uncertainty. "There, the girl holds the sacred horn. She has bewitched the king and stolen ancestral authority. Soldiers of Thornhall, protect the kingdom." Several archers lifted bows. Cassian moved in front of Mira. She caught his sleeve. "Beside," she whispered. His jaw tightened. Then he shifted, standing with her instead of shielding her completely. An arrow flew. Cassian cut it from the air before it reached them. The courtyard exploded. Not into battle yet, but into the breath before it. Mira lifted the war horn. The false horns continued to blare beyond the walls, calling soldiers toward war. Her one true horn had to cut through all of them, but the dead had warned her. Sound it as command, and she might unleash old vengeance. Sound it as witness, and truth might carry. Mira closed her eyes. She thought of Sarenvale, of the 9th banner, of every soldier below who had been taught to obey faster than doubt, of Cassian's weakening wolf, and a throne cut away from the dead so the council could rule through silence. Then she blew. The sound did not thunder. It rang clear. A single silver note crossed the courtyard, the outer fields, the open gates, and the war road beyond. It passed through ordinary horns and silenced them. It moved through soldiers without forcing their knees. It entered their ears as a question every oath inside them had to answer. What did you witness? The courtyard changed. Soldiers saw flashes. Frostmere envoys kneeling under guest. Right, council blades cutting them down. Forged blood smeared onto wolf claws. Varric's messengers riding before dawn. False reports sealed in emergency black wax. The truth passed from rank to rank like fire without flame. The lead council rider tried to flee. Cassian leapt from the balcony. He landed in the courtyard with enough force to crack stone, seized the rider by the collar, and dragged him from the saddle. But he did not kill him. He turned him toward the army. "Speak," Cassian commanded. The rider shook, fighting the horn's silver echo. The council ordered it. The army went silent. "Who?" Cassian asked. The rider's voice broke. "Varric, and the 6 war elders." The 9th banner unfurled above the courtyard. From the palace doors behind them, High Counselor Varric emerged in chains held by royal guards, now free of black runes. His face remained calm, but his eyes went to the army and saw the thing he had most feared. Note rebellion. Witness. Mira descended the steps slowly, the war horn in her arms. The soldiers parted for her. No one laughed. No one called her softfoot. No one called her empty. She stopped before Varric. The dead alphas appeared behind her, one by one, filling the courtyard with moonlit judgment. Cassian stood at her side, wounded and furious but silent. Mira lifted the horn one final time. "High Counselor Varric," she said, her voice carrying across the army. "The dead have accused you. The living have witnessed you. Will you answer?" Varric looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it chilled her more than fear would have. "Yes," he said. "I will answer before Thornhall." He raised his chained hands. Black runes flared beneath his skin. "But not before you're dead." The black runes beneath Varric's skin opened like wounds. Every soldier in the courtyard saw them. They were not council marks, not law runes, not even war seals. They were older and uglier, carved beneath the flesh in thin branching lines that crawled from Varric's wrists up his arms, across his throat, and into the corners of his mouth. As they flared, his shadow lengthened across the frost, not the shadow of an old man, but the shape of something wearing him from the inside. Cassian moved first. His sword came up, but the dead alphas behind Mira cried out as one. "Do not strike the vessel." Cassian froze with the blade half raised. Varric smiled. "Still obeying the dead?" Mira tightened her grip on the war horn. Its silver bands burned against her palms, not warning her away, but forcing her to listen deeper than fear. The runes under Varric's skin pulsed. Across the courtyard, 6 war elders stepped forward from different ranks of the army. Men Mira had seen in council processions, gray-bearded and iron-backed, each wearing the calm expression of officials who had signed too many deaths to tremble before one more. They lifted their sleeves. The same black runes glowed beneath their skin. A murmur of horror moved through the soldiers. Varric turned slowly, letting them see. "You wanted truth, girl. Here is truth. The council did not merely sever the dead. We took their silence into ourselves. We became the lock. If your ghosts accuse us, they accuse the living foundations of Thornhall's war law." Cassian's voice was lethal. "You bound the severance to your bodies. To our duty," Varric corrected. "So no frightened king, no grieving banner, daughter, no restless corpse could unravel the realm because memory hurt." Mira heard it then. Beneath his words, beneath his pride, beneath the black magic feeding through him. Fear. Not fear of punishment. Fear of chaos. That made him more dangerous, not less. A cruel man who believed himself selfish could sometimes be bargained with. A cruel man who believed himself necessary could burn an entire kingdom and call the ashes structure. The 9th banner snapped above Mira. Saren's spirit appeared at her shoulder, faint but steady. Daughter, if they are the lock, they must be opened by witness from both sides. Both sides? Mira whispered. The dead. And the living, Cassian said, hearing enough to understand. His eyes remained fixed on Varric. They built the severance from dead silence and living obedience. The war horn warmed in answer. Varric's smile faded. Mira lifted the horn but did not blow. She turned toward the soldiers filling the courtyard, men and women who had been ready minutes ago to march on Frostmere because sealed orders told them to. Some still looked terrified, some ashamed, some angry enough to need somewhere to place it. You heard the false war, Mira said. You saw the envoys murdered in the horn's memory. You heard Varric's rider confess. Her voice was not loud at first, but the horn carried it. Now, the dead need living witness. Not soldiers obeying me, not soldiers obeying the king. Witnesses. Cassian lowered his sword. That single movement did more than a speech. The Royal Alpha, wounded by council treason, chose not to answer with command. A young soldier stepped forward first. He could not have been older than 17. His helmet sat crooked, and his face still held the softness of someone not yet fully shaped by war. He dropped to one knee before the war horn. I was told Frostmere broke guest. Right, he said, voice shaking. I did not see proof. I repeated it. The horn gave a low silver note. One black rune on the nearest war elder's arm cracked. Another soldier came forward. Then a captain. Then a stable guard. Then a woman from the spear ranks, who admitted she had carried the sealed order, without asking why the blood on it smelled already cold. Each witness did not confess great evil, only obedience, only silence, only the small choices systems needed in order to become monstrous. With each truth, the runes beneath the elder's skin cracked further. Varric's calm began to fail. Enough, he snapped. You will make soldiers doubt every order. Mira looked at him. Good. The word crossed the courtyard like a blade. Cassian's mouth tightened, almost as if pride and grief had struck him at once. Varric lifted his chained hands. The black runes surged, and the 6 elders cried out. Their bodies stiffened as shadow pulled from them, forming 6 dark wolf shapes without eyes. The creatures leapt toward the witnesses. Cassian shifted. This time, fully. His wolf burst from him in a storm of black fur, pale gold eyes, and royal fury. The courtyard shook as he landed between the shadow wolves and the soldiers. He was massive, scarred, beautiful in a terrifying way, and for the first time since Mira had known him, his shift did not falter. The army gasped. The Royal Alpha's wolf had returned. But the dead Alphas did not kneel to him. They stood with him. Cassian's wolf tore into the first shadow creature. Vera the Iron Luna struck the second with her broken spectral blade. Arl the First Fang drove his ghostly sword through the third. Soldiers dragged wounded witnesses back, no longer waiting for command to become courage. Mira lifted the war horn to her lips. Saren's hand covered hers, not stopping, guiding, one witness at a time. Her mother whispered. Mira blew a short note. The sound struck the nearest war elder, and his own voice tore from him unwillingly, not a forced lie, but a truth locked too long. I signed the envoy deaths. Another note. I ordered the 9th banner children tracked. Another. I helped erase Saren Vale from the war record. Another. I told King Orlin the dead had abandoned him. The black rune web shattered across the elders one by one. They collapsed, alive, stripped of the shadow wolves that had fed through them. Only Varric remained standing. His runes did not crack. They deepened. Cassian shifted back into human form before him, breathing hard, blood and frost on his skin, sword in hand. It is over. Varric looked past him to Mira. No, now the real lock opens. The ground split beneath the courtyard. From below the training field, below the throne vault, below even the old battlefield, came the sound of thousands of dead wolves howling at once. Not the dead alphas Mira had called. Others. Alder. Angria. Unwitnessed. Saren's spirit turned pale. Varric's voice became almost gentle. Did you think the council silenced only noble dead? We buried enemies too. Traitors. Conquered packs. Wolves your precious alphas killed and never named. Open the dead, little hornbearer, and open all of them. The frost cracked outward. Black mist rose from the earth beyond the courtyard walls. The army recoiled as shapes began to form in it, wolves with broken spears in their ribs, soldiers without banners, children carrying ash from burned villages. Mira understood then why the dead had warned her. Truth was not dangerous because it lied. It was dangerous because it did not stop where comfort wanted. Cassian came to stand beside her, not in front, beside. What do we do? He asked. The question trembled through her more than any command could have. Mira looked at the war horn, then at the 9th banner, then at the rising dead no one had planned to honor. We do not close it, she said. Her voice shook, but it held. We listen. The dead beyond the courtyard walls rose without banners. That was the horror of them. The dead alphas had risen in armor, with names carved into sacred horn and stone. Their wounds were old but dignified. Their titles had survived. Even when silenced, they had remained part of Thornhall's chosen memory. These dead came as ash, bone, torn fur, and nameless grief. They rose from the black mist beyond the training field. Enemy wolves killed in border raids that never entered songs. Children from villages burned under necessary campaign law. Prisoners executed beneath false treason banners. Mothers who had died shielding sons from royal hunts. Soldiers from conquered packs whose bodies had been left where snow could cover history more cleanly than priests. The army of Thornhall began to tremble. Not because the dead attacked, because they waited. Mira stood in the courtyard with the war horn in her hands and felt the weight of every eye, living and dead, settle on her. Varric had opened the deepest wound on purpose. He had gambled that truth, once widened beyond noble crimes, would become too vast to survive. If the dead enemies of Thornhall flooded the palace in rage, the living army would beg for silence again. They would choose council locks over endless accusation. They would call Varric cruel but necessary. That was his final trap. Cassian stood beside Mira, still bloodied from battle, his true wolf breathing behind his human shape like a shadow made whole again. He looked at the dead beyond the walls and did not reach for command. "What do you hear?" he asked. Mira closed her eyes. At first, only grief. Then the war horn warmed, sorting the thousands of voices into one thread at a time. A boy asking why his village had no grave marker. A warrior asking why her surrender flag had been burned. A father asking where his daughter's name had gone. A dying wolf asking why the songs called him monster when he died defending his home. Mira's throat tightened. "They do not all want vengeance," she whispered. Cassian's gaze did not leave the mist. "What do they want?" To be counted. The words struck the courtyard harder than a war cry. Varric laughed from where he stood with black runes crawling across his skin. "Count them, then. Count every corpse beneath Thornhall's victories. Count until your army forgets how to stand. Count until the living drown in debts owed to the dead." Mira turned toward him. "You are still trying to make witness sound like ruin." "It is ruin," Varric said. "Kingdoms are built by surviving what they cannot confess." Cassian's voice came cold. "Then Thornhall has been surviving as a coward." The army heard him. So did the dead. The royal alpha stepped down from the courtyard stone and walked toward the open training field. His guards began to follow, but he lifted one hand. They stopped. Mira walked beside him, carrying the war horn. The ninth banner followed overhead, its names glowing in silver thread. Behind them came Saren Vale, Oral, Vera, and the dead alphas who had once accused the council. They did not lead now. They witnessed. At the edge of the field, Cassian stopped before the first nameless dead. It was a young woman in torn leather armor. One side of her face burned, a broken spear in her chest. She did not bow. Good, Mira thought. Cassian lowered himself to one knee. A sound moved through the living army: shock, discomfort, fear. Royal alphas did not kneel before enemy dead. This one did. "What was your name?" Cassian asked. The dead woman stared at him for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind through burned grass. Leora of Ashben. Mira lifted the war horn, but did not blow it. She spoke into it. Leora of Ashben stands witness. The horn rang once. Silver light moved through the mist and wrote the name across the air. Leora of Ashben. The dead woman's burned face changed. Not healed. Not made pretty. Simply recognized. Another dead figure stepped forward. Then another. The process was slow at first. Painfully slow. The living army shifted uneasily. Varric smiled like a man watching time become his ally. Then a soldier from Thornhall's spear ranks stepped forward. He was older, with gray in his beard and shame in his scent. "I was at Ashbend," he said. "I carried a torch. We were told the village hid assassins. I saw children inside the grain house." The field became very still. Mira turned the war horn toward him. He swallowed. "I did not open the door." The horn rang. Not as forgiveness, as record. The black runes on Varric's throat cracked. His smile vanished. Now the living understood. The dead could be counted, but the living had to answer. One by one, witnesses came forward. Some confessed acts. Some confessed silence. Some spoke names they had hidden for 20 years. Each truth wrote itself into silver light. Each name weakened the black mist. The dead did not vanish. They stood straighter. They became less like a storm and more like a gathered court. Varric's runes split across his skin. "No," he hissed. "You cannot make a kingdom out of guilt." Mira looked at him. "No, but we can stop making one out of denial." The final rune burst at his chest. Black smoke poured from Varric's mouth, forming the last shape of the severed crown above him. Not a wolf now, but a throne made of locked jaws. It lunged for the war horn. Cassian's true wolf intercepted it. The impact threw both shadows across the field. Soldiers fell back. The dead alphas raised their weapons. The nameless dead lifted their faces. Mira felt the war horn pull at every voice, every accusation, every grief. It could sound now and unleash them all. Saren's hand touched her shoulder. "One truth, daughter." Mira understood. She raised the horn and called. "High Counselor Varric, son of Nokthar, stand witness against yourself." Varric screamed. The horn rang. His own voice tore free, not from his mouth, but from every oath he had carved beneath his skin. "I feared the dead, because my father died under their accusation. I feared kings who listened, because they could not be guided. I feared peace with Frostmere, because war made councils necessary. I feared the ninth banner, because it would make power answerable." The shadow throne cracked. Varric fell to his knees. Mira stepped closer, shaking. "And Saren Vale?" she asked. His eyes lifted to hers, full of hatred and defeat. "I killed her because she would have taught King Orlin to listen." The war horn gave its final silver note. The shadow throne shattered. Varric collapsed onto the frost, alive, stripped of every rune, every hidden oath, every borrowed authority. The black mist lifted from the field. The nameless dead remained, but no longer as a storm. They stood beneath the morning sky, waiting to be counted. Cassian's true wolf returned to his side. wounded, but whole. The Royal Alpha faced the army, the dead, and Mira, his sword lowered. "The war with Frostmere is ended before it begins," he said. "The envoys will be named. The villages will be named. The 9th banner will remain restored. And every victory Thornhall cannot bear to remember honestly will be opened before the dead and living alike." No one cheered. The truth was too heavy for cheering. Then Cassian turned to Mira. He did not kneel. He did not crown her. He bowed his head, just once, before the girl his army had brought forward to humiliate. "Mira Vale," he said, "will you carry the horn as witness until Thornhall learns how to hear without forcing you to bleed for it?" Mira looked at the dead, then at her mother, then at the army that had laughed at her only that morning. Her hands tightened around the war horn. "I will carry it," she said, "but not for your throne." Cassian's mouth softened with something like respect. "For the truth," he said. Mira nodded. "For the truth." For the first time in living memory, Thornhall did not march when the war horns called. That was the first miracle. The second was quieter. The army stayed to listen. All through the morning, the training field remained filled with soldiers, servants, nobles, banner captains, council guards, ghostly alphas, and the nameless dead who had risen from beneath Thornhall's victories. No one knew where to stand at first. The living wanted lines. Armies understood lines. Rank, banner, command, enemy, ally. But truth had broken the field open, and the dead did not arrange themselves according to Thornhall's comfort. So Mira stood at the center, with the war horn in her hands, and the 9th banner above her, one truth at a time. That was what her mother had told her. The first names recorded were the Frostmere envoys, 12 of them. Men and women who had crossed under guest right with peace knots, tied into their hair and silver branches in their saddlebags. The council had killed them before dawn, dressed the bodies as assassins, and sent forged orders to the army before the blood had dried. Cassian stood beside Mira as the names were read. Not above her, not behind her, beside. His armor had been cleaned only enough to keep blood from dripping onto the records. His wounds were wrapped beneath black cloth, but his face remained pale with pain and exhaustion. Still, he did not retreat to a private chamber. The Royal Alpha remained in the open field, where his army could see him hear every accusation against his throne. That mattered. Mira did not forgive him for what his bloodline had inherited. Forgiveness was too large a word for one morning, but she saw the shape of his choice. He could have blamed Varric alone. He could have called the council corrupt, and the crown innocent. Instead, he made the army stay while the dead spoke against Thornhall itself. By noon, messengers rode to Frostmere carrying no battle challenge, but 12 names and a royal confession under Cassian's seal. By sunset, the southern gate was closed against war and opened for witness. No spear crossed the border. No wolf was sent to raid. No bard was allowed to sing of the day as victory. Cassian forbade it. "This is not victory," he told the assembled captains. "This is the first day we stop mistaking silence for peace." High Counselor Varric was held in the old iron circle beneath the restored 9th banner. Without his runes he looked smaller, but not sorry. His eyes remained sharp, his spine straight, his hatred undiminished. Some demanded his execution before nightfall. Others wanted him dragged through the streets. Mira understood the hunger. She had felt it when he finally said her mother's name with murder attached to it. But the warhorn did not ask for speed. It asked for record. Varric would live long enough to hear every name he buried. That was Cassian's sentence, spoken before dead and living alike. Varric, the 6 war elders, and every council officer involved in the severance would be stripped of rank, land, seal, and voice-in-law. They would remain under guard until every false war, every erased banner, every buried envoy, and every murdered witness had been read into Thornhall's restored record. Only then would the families of the dead decide final judgment. Varric called it weakness. Mira looked at him and said, No. Weakness was killing people before they could speak. He did not answer. That silence was the first thing she ever took from him. In the days that followed, Thornhall changed slowly, painfully, and not always nobly. Some soldiers wept when they heard the names of villages they had burned under orders. Some shouted that the dead had no right to judge the living. Some deserted before their own memories could be called. Some returned the next morning and stood in line to confess. The 9th banner was raised not above the royal throne, but beside the war records. Its cloth remained dark gray, edged with moon-white thread. Saren Vale's name shone at the center, and around it grew new names every day. Not only alphas, not only victors, envoys, servants, enemy dead, children, wolves without banners, the forgotten, the inconvenient, the ones Thornhall had stepped over on its way to glory. The war horn was placed on a stone altar beneath the banner, but it did not leave Mira. Not truly. Whenever she entered the hall, it warmed. Whenever someone lied before it, the silver bands darkened. Whenever a forgotten name was spoken, it gave one quiet note, like a breath released after years underwater. The army stopped calling her Wolfless. That did not mean they knew what to call her. Some whispered hornbearer, some echo vessel, some dead speaker, some bowed too deeply, which made her more uncomfortable than mockery ever had. It was strange how quickly people who had called her nothing wanted to make her sacred once they feared her. Mira refused all titles at first. Then, on the 7th day, Saren appeared beside her at dusk, while the training field lay empty under pale snow. Her mother's spirit looked less like ash now, more like memory given peace, though sorrow still shaped her eyes. "You will need a name they can speak without turning you into a weapon," Saren said. Mira looked at the 9th banner. "What name did you carry?" "Hornbearer." "That sounds heavy." "It is." Mira almost smiled, and the ache of it surprised her. "Then I will carry it until someone better comes." Saren's gaze softened. "No one better is required, only someone willing to listen." Mira wanted to ask 100 things. What her father had been like, whether she had ever laughed as a baby, whether Saren had known she would grow up lonely, whether it hurt to die with an infant in her arms and a kingdom refusing to remember her. But the dead had limits. So did the living. Instead, Mira whispered, "Did you know I would be wolfless?" Saren reached out, her ghostly fingers hovering near Mira's cheek without touching. "You were never wolfless. Your wolf was not missing. Your gift was listening where others expected claws." The words entered Mira quietly, not healing everything. Enough. That night, Cassian found her near the old battlefield where she had first heard the dead. He came alone, without guards, without crown, without command. His black cloak moved in the wind, and his face still carried the exhaustion of a king whose throne had become a confession. He stopped several paces away. "May I stand here?" Mira looked at him. "You are the Royal Alpha. You can stand wherever you wish." His mouth tightened slightly. "That is the kind of answer I am trying to deserve less often." She did not make it easy for him by smiling, but she did not tell him to leave. He came beside her, leaving space. For a while, they watched the frost gather on the field. Beneath it lay bones, names, accusations, and the first place Thornhall had tried to humiliate her. Now, it felt different. Not safe. Not redeemed, but awake. Cassian spoke quietly. Frostmere answered. Mira turned toward him. "They will send witnesses under truce. Families of the envoys. Record keepers. Their young alpha has agreed not to march while Thornhall opens the war ledgers. That is not peace." "No," Cassian said. "But it is the first road that does not begin with a lie." She nodded. He looked toward the war horn in her hands. "You once said you would carry it, but not for my throne. I meant it. I know." His voice lowered. "Then carry it against my throne too, when needed." Mira's chest tightened despite herself. Trust from powerful men could be another trap. But this did not feel like a gift he expected gratitude for. It felt like a burden he was finally willing to share with the truth, instead of hide from it. She looked at him fully. If I do, you may hate what answers. I already hate much of what is answered. And still, the wind moved between them. Cassian's true wolf appeared behind him, not as a threat, but as a quiet, dark shape beneath the moon. It looked at Mira, then lowered its head once, not kneeling, acknowledging. Mira felt the war horn warm. No dead voice spoke. For once, silence did not feel empty. Weeks later, Thornhall gathered in the war hall, not for a coronation, not for a battle summons, but for the restoration of the Ninth Banner. The old royal throne remained, but Cassian had ordered the council seats removed from their raised platform. In their place stood a circular witness table made from black stone, wolfwood, and fragments of broken council seals. Around it sat representatives from the army, lower barracks, border packs, Frostmere witnesses, healers, servants, and banner families. Power looked less grand when forced to share a table. That was why Mira trusted it more. She stood before the restored banner in a simple, dark gown, edged with moon-white thread. Her hair was braided the way Saren's had been in the vision. The war horn rested in both her hands. Cassian stood across from her, crownless for the ceremony. He had not given up rule, but he had changed how it stood. No war horn could be sounded without witness. No council order could seal a death record. No battlefield could be cleared before names were taken from both sides. No child found after war could be declared wolfless, orphaned, or nameless until the hornbearer's office and 3-pack witnesses had searched the record. And no alpha of Thornhall could claim ancestral blessing if the dead were forbidden to answer. Cassian spoke before the hall. Mira Vale was brought before my army to be humiliated as Wolfless. Instead, she revealed that Thornhall's war law had been severed from truth. The dead did not rise to rule us. They rose because we had stopped listening. He turned toward her, and every eye followed. Mira felt the old fear stir, the fear of being made symbol instead of person. But Cassian did not crown her, did not claim her, did not call her chosen by his wolf or saved by his protection. He simply said, Mira Vale, horn-bearer of the Ninth Banner, stands under no ownership of my throne. Her duty is witness. Even when that witness stands against me. The hall listened. Mira lifted the horn. I was told I had no wolf, she said. But Thornhall measured spirit only by teeth and claws. My mother died because she believed the dead should be heard before the living marched in their name. I will carry her banner. I will carry this horn, but I will not carry silence for any king, council, army, or grave. The war horn gave one clear silver note. The dead alphas appeared behind her. So did the nameless dead. For the first time, they stood together in the same hall. Not reconciled, not healed, but recorded. That was where healing began. When the ceremony ended, Sarenvale's spirit came to Mira one last time near the altar. Her outline was faint now, softened by peace. You will not need me as often, Saren said. Mira's throat closed. That sounds like leaving. It is more like resting. I only just found you. Saren's eyes filled with sorrow and love. No, daughter, you heard me long before you knew my name. Mira held the horn against her heart. Saren touched her brow, light as moon frost. Then she faded into the Ninth Banner, where her name remained bright. Mira did not cry until the hall emptied. Cassian found her there later, sitting beneath the banner with the war horn beside her. He stopped at the edge of the moonlight. Should I go? He asked. Mira wiped her face with the heel of her hand. No. He came closer, slowly, and sat on the stone floor beside her instead of standing above her. For a while, he said nothing. That was a kindness she had not expected from an alpha. At last he spoke. I do not know how to comfort grief I helped inherit. You do not comfort it, Mira said. You make sure no one has to hide it again. He nodded. Then I will. She looked at him. Do not promise easily. I am learning not to. Something quiet passed between them then. Not a mate bond declared beneath banners. Not devotion earned in a single crisis. Something slower, more careful. A dangerous beginning made possible because neither of them pretended truth had made love simple. Cassian reached toward her hand, then stopped before touching. Mira looked at his hand, then placed hers in it. His fingers closed carefully around hers, warm and scarred. The warhorn rested silent beside them. Outside, Thornhall's wolves howled under a clear moon. Not a call to war, not a command from the throne, but an answer moving from ridge to ridge, living to dead, dead to living. Mira Vale had stood before the army as a wolfless girl meant to fail. She lifted the warhorn, and every dead alpha answered. But in the end, her greatest power was not summoning the dead. It was teaching the living to listen before they marched.